ever found yourself leading a team that can't grow, or worse, has to shrink? In our latest episode of We've All Done It, I sit down with leadership expert Susan Bittner to dive into the tough realities leaders are facing right now. We talk about the shifting job market, the challenge of keeping teams motivated with fewer resources, and real strategies for navigating uncertainty when the old rulebook just doesn't work anymore. Whether you're new to this or you've seen it all before, I promise you'll walk away with actionable advice to help you and your team weather the storm. Let's get going. Welcome back, everybody. It's so good to see slash hear you.
Yeah,
How's it going?
it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I am so excited. That is Miss Susan Bittner. Some of you might recognize her. She's been on the show a couple of times. And today I have her back because we're going to talk a little bit about what to do with your team when your team can't grow, or worse, when your team has to shrink. Anybody else feeling that these days? Because we're hearing it and seeing it quite a bit, aren't we, Susan?
Yeah, it definitely seems top of mind with a lot of the corporate and individual clients that I work with. That's always one of the biggest things is how do I tell my team that no, the universe isn't going to bring us more people and there's more work, but not more people, or navigating with leaders on how to identify who they're going to separate from and stuff as the team is growing. It's probably one of the most common topics that I've unfortunately been having to deal with in the past 6 to 10 months.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, I would say, over the last 5 years, because I remember there used to be a time when I feel like it was like it was like a whole different universe where budgets were okay, and so those merit increases were coming in, people got promoted on a pretty reliable schedule. As long as you did the work, there was a growth ladder for you. And it feels like over the last I wouldn't say necessarily since COVID, because I don't think that's necessarily true, but I will definitely say within the last year or so, it feels like there's been a tremendous disruption to the point that's no longer guaranteed for
Well,
most.
let's be really honest. I don't think I've ever worked with a client in all of the years that I've been doing this where I've ever had a client who comes and we're navigating through things and they're like, they want to give me more people, and I just don't know what to do if they give me more headcount. I just don't have the work for all of these extra headcount that they like. That's not a thing. That's never been a thing.
Yeah.
It's always been, I think, that every leader has, on some level, had a little secret wish list of if I could, I'd hire this person. But I think that the disruption, the shift has been from the head count is no longer nice to have to some of the cuts that leaders are experiencing are what they would have considered and what they do consider essential. And it's also a little bit of a shift of spending a lot of time with my leaders having the conversation of I can't go back to my team one more time and tell them we're adding this work on and no, we're not going to be adding people to do the work. And it's also, there's this saying where, like, some leaders, I feel like they're one step away from holding up a flag of beatings will continue until morale improves because they're like, I don't know how to. And they're tired too, and they're stressed out and they're maxed out. And then having to deliver these messages, they're starting to feel like the horsemen of the apocalypse a little bit like, here I come again with more bad news and figuring out how to help them. And a lot of leaders, I think, they they want to help their people.
Yeah.
So it's also about keeping their team whole, but it's also about keeping their team engaged, keeping their team motivated because we can't dangle there's no carrots, there's not as many carrots to dangle. Some organizations are cutting back on professional development funds. Some companies, they're flattening out the organizations. To your point, raises are not a given anymore, and bonuses are even less. So a lot of the conversations and a lot of the work that I've been doing and I've been working with clients on is getting creative and figuring out how to keep their people whole, how to keep themselves whole.
Yeah.
Because I think there's that level of leadership like where people are just soul tired, not soul tired, like to their very marrow. And one of the most common things that we say is you got to put your mask on before you help others. So helping to keep those leaders a little bit whole so that they can then do that for their teams.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know this is not necessarily every industry.
No,
And I feel like there's a cycle of things and how they happen. And depending on where you are and just your experiences too, navigating these challenges can be a different experience. Some people, I feel like they've been through the grinder a lot in their careers. They probably have some means and methods to get them through. And then there's people who this is the first time they've really had to deal with it in this way. Or you have been through the grind and you've tried everything that you know to try, and it's still not helping you move forward.
right.
It's still not enough to navigate this moment. So that's why I'm excited to have you on so that we can give our listeners, if this is you, because based on what I'm hearing as well, this seems to be a more common concern and challenge for leaders is how to navigate strategically, how to think about this, how to operationally navigate this, because your teams depend on you. And I always say this, leadership is all fun and games. People get into leadership because there's a title and there's money. And these are the moments that really separate out and really, this is what leadership is actually about. It's
Right.
it's the parts that are hard. If it were all easy, anybody could be a leader. This is the moment where you really have to put your money where your mouth is and you have to actually stand in some discomfort, and you're going to have to figure out how to help yourself, how to help others, particularly when it doesn't feel great. In essence, when maybe you don't have all the answers, which never feels good. Been
Right.
there, done that, hated
Mm.
it, but that's what you signed up for.
And I think that the reality is, and this isn't, it's not a blame game, it's not a fault game, but I think a lot of leaders, they don't, they might get into leadership with the best of intentions, but those circumstances that you're talking about, we're not always great at preparing our leaders for those moments.
Correct. Oh, yes.
And we're not, and we don't give them there's not even a what to expect when you're expecting a book that, is not as useful as it should be. And then after you, like, it's the same thing. What to expect when you're expecting. Where's my book on what to expect when they're 11 and you've got preteen? So, what to expect when you have to do performance reviews. Sure, there's stuff on that. What to expect when you have to hire people. There's a lot of resources on that. But I feel like there's not as many straightforward resources on. We can talk about having our difficult conversations and our constructive feedback and all of that, but there's not one thing that is saying, I've got a great employee here and I've got a great team. I've got a good employee or somebody, and I can't give them any roadmap to success. And we don't, there's not as much preparation for that. Because I spent a lot of my time in my career. I've done a lot of work with individual development planning and with building your talent and succession planning, and they all are still really valuable, necessary skills. But I do feel like we are in a time where there's still a little bit of a haziness about the roadmaps have changed and we're rewriting those roadmaps a little bit, and we need to make sure that we're preparing our leaders to have those conversations where I'm not giving you constructive feedback because I think you're a great employee. I'm not telling you to go necessarily, if you build these skills, I can set you on the path to this. No, this is just, hey, we have this new work now, and it now falls under this title that you've been in. And how do we, so that's, I feel like that's a conversation that a lot of leaders are having to have, and it doesn't feel good. And to give them some help in figuring out how to navigate those is really important right now.
So let's jump into that. So, what is one thing you would tell a leader who doesn't have a frame of reference, right?
Mhm.
So, somebody who this is the first time they've faced this kind of adversity, what is one key thing you would want a leader to know or do with this is where they're finding themselves right now?
I think that it's really about, it's like we need to take the entire deck of cards and shuffle them all again and figure out what that looks like. So instead of saying, okay, Susan has won the lottery and she is removing herself from the workforce, and we now have to cover Susan's job. So I'm going to look at Susan's job description and I'm going to give 10% to Kim and 5% to Mike and 2% to Dion, and that's what we're going to do. I think that instead, what we need to really do when we're dealing with that kind of a situation is we need to look at the entire deck of cards and figure out not just the conversation of does Dion have more capacity that we can put more on Dion. I think it's more about we take a look at the entire body of work and figure out what lights Dion up or what makes Susan Kimberly happy. And can we shuffle things around a little bit so that even if I'm having to give Kim 10% more work, can I shuffle the work around to give something that maybe lights Kim up and take away some of the other stuff and figure out that. So looking at your talent holistically and your body of work holistically, I think is essential to be more strategic instead of continually putting your finger in the dam and being like, okay, I have this job description that I've got to just parcel out and I'm just going to start throwing it against the wall and figure out who's not going to crack. You need to bring it all together and just really look like holistically.
I think that's a good start because if you take it even one step lower, do you make sure you know your team
Oh, yeah.
and not just, hey, who are you? What exactly do you do? And the reason why I say this is because I've worked with teams before where teams were very large and it was very difficult for leaders to keep a pulse on all the people that reported to them. But in order to holistically look at your
Yes.
team has to have some trust that you actually know who they are and you know what they do. So I would even pull that layer back a bit and say, spend some time actually talking to your people. Make
Oh,
sure
and
you know them well.
yes, there's nothing worse than it's like the great aunt that you told when you were 5 that you really liked kittens, and so now at 40 you're still getting a kitten figurine for every holiday. Like you need to, and it's not enough to say that you know your team because you did ID individual development plans 2 years ago. No, you need to know your team today because, and you need to be having those conversations, and having those conversations solve a multitude of, or address multitude of situations because your team needs to know you're trying
Yeah.
and they need to feel seen and feel heard. And having those conversations and being a little bit vulnerable and authentic. And I might not be able to. I'm not a fairy godmother. I'm probably not going to be able to wave a magic wand. And if you hate filing, just to give a really simplistic, can't guarantee I'm going to be able to take away all the filing. And I want to know what does light you up and what really drags you down, and I'm going to do what I can. But we can't promise them We can't promise them rainbows and sunshine if we don't have rainbows and sunshine on back order. And we can't use outdated data.
Yeah.
We have to be authentic. We have to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable doesn't mean being like, I'm miserable too. This
I was about to say, don't
sucks.
trauma dump.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
Like,
is not meant to be
yeah,
a
this
trauma
this
dump.
is not a Manhattans or margaritas and moping conversation, but you
That
know,
conversation can happen with a completely different audience.
yeah.
But know your audience.
Mhm.
Know, yeah, I was about to say like the transparency part, because I've seen that get leaders into so much trouble being mindful of language and what you promise and what people interpret as a promise, which is why always following up whatever conversations you have with emails for all my HR folks out there,
Hmm.
documentation, maybe
Hmm.
some legal folks. If it's not documented, it didn't
Hmm.
happen.
Clear, concise.
And just following it up to make sure that there's clear alignment, that maybe you said something that could have been interpreted by, if I do X, that means I get a promotion. I've heard that before. You said, nope, those words never came out of my mouth, but what they interpreted
Hmm.
is that if they've met some benchmarks of some kind, that would put them in line for a promotion. And I'm quite certain that's not what I said because again, I've lived in times where things were rough and like I knew there was going to be no promotions for two
Well,
years.
and
I'm
unless, oh,
certain it
yeah,
was not
unless
said
you
this way.
know that I keep the P word out of the conversation completely. Like, mind your P's and Q's. Like, no promotion conversation, no salary compensation kind of situations.
Going back to something you said, clear and concise, don't use vague terminology.
Oh,
Like
no.
when you're talking transparency and when we're talking, and I think this is one of the things that we screw up too as leaders. And I know I did. I've done this particularly when I was earlier in my career because you're trying so hard to be likable and you don't want to piss off your people with too much truth
Right.
that you soften your language a lot. And in that softening of language, you open the door to a lot of vagueness, a lot
Yeah.
of they're going to interpret it the way they want to. And you're essentially not doing yourself any favor versus
Or
just
them.
coming out and saying, I know the budget isn't going to allow for a promotion. I know that's frustrating, but let's see what we can work with. Let's see what we can do to accommodate you. Like, how can
Mhm.
we make sure that we're giving you opportunities to continue to grow? How can we give you opportunities to work on projects that you're passionate about? Those are specific things without, and again, it's not an easy or comfortable conversation, but it's a much better conversation to have than one where somebody walks away thinking they may get something that's not possible.
And yeah, because I think as leaders, there's a lot of times where there's that low-hanging fruit of if then. If you take on this project that you're not excited about at all, then we might be able to give you this new title.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, that is just cruel. If you know that's, and have the hard conversation, because the reality is that we all know, any of a lot of us who have, if we've been through in the corporate world for a while, like the job market changes, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And the hope is that there ultimately will be a path again. And so think about that moment when the path does open up and you can say, all this work, all of your efforts, all of your development, you're now in a perfect position. But since you don't, unless you have a date
No, I wouldn't
and
even say a date unless HR has told you that this position exists, there's budget approved. Do not talk about a promotional opportunity.
right.
Just don't.
No. And even if you have an employee on a performance improvement plan that you're like, when this person goes, this person's going to fill in that position. Nope. Because I think that the people are realizing like the job market is what it is, and they are like they're gonna you might feel like a performance improvement plan is one foot out the door and the other on a banana peel, but they might learn how to ski on a banana peel and ski themselves right back. So you literally Make no promises, make no guarantees. Don't paint yourself into a corner.
Now, yes, because I would say that's the thing. I've even seen experienced people get themselves a little muddled up. Just again, and I think it's a lot of our nature is that because there's that part of us that wants to nurture and wants to like it wants to lessen the blow.
And let's be really
Because people
honest
are
here.
already tired, they're frustrated, and to your point, people want to leave. Now, at this moment when we're recording this, the economy is a little tighter here in the US, so jobs are not as plentiful as they were, say, 3 years ago. But that could change
I could.
in 3 years. There can be a swing where it's the employee's economy versus the employer's economy, where it's in your favor. But just
Today is not that day.
today is not that day. And it goes back to that same thing. How do you make sure you're being very clear and
And
transparent?
it's interesting because you said a part of us wants to nurture our employees. I don't even know all leaders. I don't think all leaders want to nurture, but I do think that engagement survey results provide us with enough fear
When I say nurture, it means that you want to soften the blow. Like you're trying to minimize the damage of reality. Nurture
for
may not
those
be the
in the
right
world,
word.
because there are
They're
those.
trying to they're
There are
trying to minimize the damage that they know
okay.
is going to come when they have to tell the hard truth.
As I think of a few managers I've had in my past who I think enjoyed it, if there are any of those type of managers, then at the very least, think of the impact
Yeah.
of negative engagement surveys results. Because I think that that's the other thing is that we're not lessening our expectations on leaders. We are still we're still doing engagement surveys to a certain degree in a lot of organizations. And there still is, HR still is a call in if those scores drop desperate, like significantly. And
Because those
so,
scores tie to your productivity. So if you don't have great engagement scores, chances are there, not always, but usually there's a correlation between low engagement and poor productivity output.
yes. And yes. And that's a really easy measurable thing for people to look to. And I think that it's an important time. Trust is an important thing right now. Like it's a hugely important thing. And I think that those that are able to give and receive trust, because that's an important component too. You have to be trustworthy, but you also have to be willing to trust your team because those leaders who, are like I want my team to trust me. I want my team to trust me. And if I have a client who comes to me with that type of a question or a scenario, one of my very first questions will be is, do you trust your team? Because it has to be a two-way street and that's an important aspect of it. That you have to trust that they're willing to kind of lock arms a little bit when the chips are down. And if the chips aren't down, then you have to trust that they are going to to use the freedom or autonomy or a little bit of space in between the next time that we have to lock arms, kind of a thing.
No, that is so true. And again, it's in these moments that trust tends to be a slippery slope in general, just because there's so much changing so quickly, or maybe again, promises were made a couple of years ago, and now suddenly the fulfillment of those promises aren't happening, even
Mm,
though it's of no fault of anyone, but it does damage,
yeah,
it damages the culture, it damages relationships that people are not able to hold up their end of the bargain.
yeah. And it's hard, I think, but I think it's one of those things that if you have a plan and if you have the conversations, even when the conversations are not the most fun, put your cards on the table. And then I think that you can weather the storm
Yeah.
or the new landscape. If it's more than a storm, if this is the landscape, then you are better positioned to weather the changing landscape.
Yeah. I'm excited that you're on the show, and I want to give our listeners a little heads up. So, if you guys are finding this topic very interesting, you're going to be very excited, hopefully, to know that Susan is actually going to be taking this little conversation we're having to a much, much deeper level in an event that I'm going to be hosting in January. So, this is a little bit of a teaser. This is the first time we are publicly talking about the virtual 3-day virtual Navigating Uncertainty Leadership Summit that Miss Susan is going to have her own session. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your session about how it's going to be this, but more when you present in January?
Yes. So I do. I think like this is a hugely important topic, and I've put together a full length session where I'm going to provide you with some really specific tips. There's going to be a takeaway. I know you haven't really gotten into the details, but if there'll be a takeaway for anybody who comes, but then if they choose to get the full access pass, then there'll be an even more of a more in depth because I think that this is hugely important. And I think that this topic, if as a leader, you feel able to have these conversations, because we can all sit here and talk about how this is hard, this is sucks, this is bad. But I really feel, as someone who has been a leader, who's been an individual contributor, who's been on the outside looking in through consulting, that what can help is an actual resource. Give me a little bit of a what to expect when the job market's flat.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want to talk about. And I know that because the conversation is about, I think it's, we'll do about an hour. And even that might still not be enough. But I promise that my goal is to, if you come for the hour, that at the end of it you would at least have the 5 or 6 steps to feel more prepared to go into this conversation and to do what you need to do, because we all need to kind of, I don't want to have to make you reinvent the wheel. And I can talk about all the feelings that everything is bringing up for days, but what I think our leaders need right now is a plan.
Yeah.
And so I want to at least give you the foundation of a plan. And I
Well,
promise to do that in the time.
and I'm excited because it's what you have in mind is a roadmap for people. And I agree with you. This is a bit of a teaser. I'm not going to give you everything about the summit yet.
Just hard because
I've been working on this for a bit now, behind the scenes, and we're almost ready to turn everything on. So I'll just tell you right now, if you're not on my newsletter, you should get on it. Lickety split, just because I'm cool. No, just kidding. That if you're on my newsletter, that's where you're going to hear about all of it first. But it's coming very soon where we'll be able to share a lot more. But that's the idea, is how do we put tools in leaders' hands so they're not stuck having to figure so much stuff out by themselves and navigate just the challenging times that are right now. And not everybody's facing the same kinds of challenges. Depending on your industry, depending on your leader level, your challenges are different. But we have a little bit for everybody, something to help out just about everybody figure out, to hope just something to help you take whatever you're doing now to the next level, or give you a different alternative approach to solving a problem that maybe you haven't tried. And so
well,
I'm
and
very excited to have you be a part of the event.
I'm super excited. I'm very grateful because this summit is not something where this is something where you really went out and you, based upon your years of experience in this, like you really handpicked who you thought would be best for this topic. So that, and people that you knew would be able to give like true insight and true resources and tips. And apparently one of them backed out. So you came to me. So thanks for that. Now,
That is not true. I
I'm
mean, here's the
kidding.
thing. I definitely will say the people that are going to be a part of this, I know them. If you've been a fan of this show for a while, you're going to recognize a whole lot of faces and names. If you just listen, you're going to recognize. I encourage you to go. You can see them live. But no, this was about making something that was impactful and making something that really brought a lot of value.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about it. keep following me because stuff's going to be coming out really soon. But we thought it would be fun to tease Susan's topic and a little bit about her passion behind it and what it means and how little small things can have a tremendous impact when you, especially in times of chaos and uncertainty.
Yeah, definitely.
And with that, we will close for today, but who knows, Miss Susan may be back next year because there's always more to talk about. When you're in leadership, it never ends. It's like being, I'm not one, but you're a parent, Susan. Does it ever end?
No, no. It's just a
Exactly.
new flavor, new
See?
day.
Same thing with leadership. I feel like it never ends. And as each generation comes, they bring new challenges and new ways of approaching things. So, as far as I'm concerned, we're in this for the long haul. Thank you guys for being here. Susan, thank you for being
Thanks for
here.
having
And
me.
I can't wait to have you see you in January. And I hope to see all the listeners there as well. And I'll give you all the information how to participate. But go hop on that newsletter, kimberlyjbenoit.com/newsletter. I'll have links in the bio and in the show notes, as well as links to how to connect with Susan because she will be talking more about her session in the lead up to January. So we'll make sure you know how to find her as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Talk soon.
I've got two things before I let you go. One, if you've ever gotten any value from the show, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps and absolutely makes my day. The second thing is if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with me, please shoot me an email at podcast@kimberlyjbenoit.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, see you in the next episode.